The Archons embedded a tracking mechanism into every prayer posture taught by institutional religion. But there's one ancient hand position that makes you invisible to their surveillance grid. Hidden in texts the Church suppressed for 1700 years, mystics who could see beyond the veil discovered that Jesus taught his inner circle a specific gesture that disrupts archonic frequency monitoring. This wasn't symbolic. This was spiritual technology. When you place your hands in this exact configuration, you create an energetic blind spot in the system that feeds on human consciousness. The beings that monitor your thoughts, harvest your prayers, and redirect your spiritual energy suddenly cannot locate you. You vanish from their detection field. If you've ever felt watched during prayer or sensed that something intercepts your spiritual communications before they reach source, your instincts are correct. Drop a comment if you've ever felt something blocking your connection to the divine. Ancient texts discovered in the Egyptian desert in 1945 contain something the Church never wanted you to see. Detailed instructions on how Jesus trained his disciples to become invisible to the forces that monitor human souls. Not metaphorically invisible, energetically undetectable. These weren't teachings for the masses. These were techniques for those preparing to break free from the reincarnation system entirely. The texts describe entities the early Gnostics called Archons, beings that exist in a frequency just beyond normal human perception, feeding on the energy generated by human emotion, particularly fear and worship. But here's what makes this different from every other spiritual teaching you've encountered. The Gnostics didn't just warn about these entities, they provided specific countermeasures, physical gestures, hand positions, techniques that disrupt the Archon's ability to track consciousness. When Jesus gathered his inner circle, not the crowds, not the general followers, but those being prepared for direct transmission of knowledge, he taught them that prayer itself had been corrupted. The very act of clasping hands together, bowing the head, closing the eyes, these weren't divine instructions. These were postures that make you energetically visible to everything watching. Think about it. Every major religion teaches essentially the same prayer posture. Hands together, head down, eyes closed, body submissive. Why? Because this configuration opens specific energy channels while closing others. It makes you a perfect antenna for transmission of your spiritual energy outward. But it does nothing to protect you from what might be receiving that transmission. The Gospel of Philip, one of the suppressed texts, contains a passage that scholars still struggle to understand. Those who pray in the manner of the rulers will be seen by the rulers, but those who pray in the manner taught by the Anointed One create a veil of light that blinds the watchers. For centuries, translators assumed this was poetic language, metaphor. But mystics who entered deep trance states and accessed ancient records confirmed something far more literal. There is a specific hand position, a mudra, though that term comes from a different tradition, that Jesus taught for private prayer. When you hold your hands in this configuration, you generate a field that disrupts archonic surveillance frequencies. Modern seers who can perceive energy fields have observed what happens when someone prays in the standard religious posture versus this ancient configuration. In standard prayer, they see cords of energy extending from the crown chakra, the heart, and the solar plexus, reaching upward but being intercepted before reaching source. The energy goes somewhere, but not where the person intends. It's harvested, redirected, used as fuel by entities that exist specifically to feed on human devotional energy. This isn't speculation. This is what happens when beings with expanded perception watch what occurs during conventional prayer. The energy you think you're sending to God, to the universe, to your higher self, it's being siphoned off by intermediaries. But when someone uses the hand position Jesus taught his inner circle, everything changes. The energy field around the body shifts. Instead of broadcasting outward like a beacon, the person becomes what can only be described as energetically cloaked. The archonic surveillance grid, and yes, it functions like a grid, with specific frequency parameters, suddenly cannot detect that consciousness. The person doesn't disappear from reality. They disappear from the monitoring system. They create what the ancient texts called the silence that roars, a state where you're fully present in physical reality, but completely absent from the spiritual surveillance apparatus monitoring humanity. Here's the position. Instead of pressing your palms together in the traditional prayer gesture, you hold your hands in front of your heart with palms facing each other, but not touching. There should be approximately 6 inches between your palms. Your fingers point upward, but slightly angled inward, forming a subtle V shape. This is critical. Your thumbs should be crossed, right thumb over left for most people, creating an X at the base of the configuration. Your index fingers and thumbs form a diamond-shaped opening through which you focus your attention. This opening becomes the focal point. You don't close your eyes, you gaze through the diamond, slightly unfocused, seeing but not seeing. This hand position does three things simultaneously. First, it creates a closed energy circuit within your own field instead of broadcasting outward. Your left hand becomes the receptive channel, your right hand becomes the projective channel, and by positioning them in opposition without contact, you create a contained loop. Second, the diamond opening formed by your thumbs and forefingers acts as a focusing lens for consciousness. When you direct your awareness through this opening, you're creating a narrow band transmission that operates on a frequency the Archon's surveillance system isn't calibrated to detect. Third, the crossed thumbs create what energy workers call a null point, a space where opposing polarities cancel each other out, generating a blind spot in the detection field. Ancient mystics taught that the Archons exist in a realm just adjacent to physical reality, monitoring humanity through what they called the gates of perception. Every time you pray in a way that opens these gates widely, through emotional intensity, submissive postures, or broadcast-style devotion, you become visible to everything on the other side. The Archons don't care what God you pray to. Catholic, Protestant, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, the specific religion is irrelevant to them. What matters is the energy signature you generate. Devotional energy, particularly when mixed with feelings of unworthiness or need, is their preferred food source. This is why so many religious traditions emphasize human sinfulness, unworthiness, and complete dependence on external divine authority, not because it's spiritually true, because it generates the exact emotional energetic cocktail the Archons feed on. But Jesus taught something different to those ready to hear it. He taught that you are already divine. You already have direct access to Source. You don't need intermediaries. You don't need institutions. You don't need to broadcast your prayers through the standard channels that these entities monitor. The hand position, he taught, is a key to direct connection, a way to communicate with your own higher consciousness and with Source itself without the signal being intercepted. When you pray using this mudra, you're essentially using an encrypted channel. The Archons can detect that you're generating spiritual energy. Your energy signature doesn't completely disappear, but they cannot read the content. They cannot track where the transmission goes. They cannot intercept it. 20th century seers who entered altered states of consciousness thousands of times confirmed what the ancient text described. There are specific hand positions, breath patterns, and focal points that create blind spots in the surveillance grid. Not all of them involve the same gesture Jesus taught. Different traditions discovered different techniques, but they all operate on the same principle, creating a contained, focused, narrow-band energetic signature that operates outside the frequency range these entities monitor. Some mystics describe it as being able to see without being seen. Your consciousness remains fully active, fully aware, fully present, but to the watchers, you've vanished. The Church, of course, suppressed this teaching almost immediately. By the 4th century, when Christianity became the official religion of Rome and the institutional hierarchy took control, any practice that gave individuals direct access to spiritual experience without priestly mediation was eliminated. Books were burned, teachers were executed, the texts that survived were buried in jars and hidden in desert caves, not to be found again for 1,600 years. Why? Because an awakened soul that can connect directly with Source, that cannot be monitored or controlled by the archonic surveillance system, is a soul that's preparing to exit the reincarnation trap entirely. And the Archons, along with their earthly institutional partners, cannot allow that. Think about what happens when you pray using standard religious methods. You close your eyes, eliminating visual input that keeps you grounded in present awareness. You bow your head, submitting your crown chakra, the connection point to higher consciousness. You press your palms together, creating a unified broadcast antenna instead of a contained circuit. You often kneel, placing your body in the most vulnerable physical posture possible. And then you speak your prayers outward, broadcasting your needs, fears, hopes, and devotional energy into the space around you. Every single element of this process makes you maximally visible and vulnerable to entities monitoring human consciousness. This isn't an accident. This is by design. But when you use the hand position Jesus taught, everything inverts. You keep your eyes open, maintaining present awareness. You keep your head level or slightly elevated, claiming your divine sovereignty. You create a contained energy circuit with your hands, stopping the broadcast. You can sit, stand, or walk, maintaining physical power and mobility. And you direct your consciousness through the diamond focal point, creating a narrow transmission on a frequency the watchers cannot intercept. You're not hiding. You're not afraid. You're simply operating outside their detection range. You're using spiritual technology they don't have access to. Modern spiritual teachers often talk about setting energetic boundaries and protecting your energy field. These are valid concepts, but they don't go far enough. Protection implies defense against attack. What Jesus taught was something more sophisticated: invisibility. Not being targeted in the first place, the Archons cannot attack what they cannot detect. They cannot harvest energy they cannot locate. When you pray using this mudra, you essentially disappear from their monitoring grid while remaining fully present in your own experience. It's not about building walls. It's about operating on a frequency they're not watching. Have you noticed that after intense prayer sessions, you often feel drained rather than energized? That's not normal. Real connection with Source should fill you with vitality, clarity, and power. If you feel exhausted after praying, it's because your energy is being harvested. You're sending out a broadcast that something else is receiving and feeding on. The institutional religions will tell you this exhaustion is holy surrender or dying to self. But the ancient texts reveal something different. It's extraction. You're being drained by entities that live off human spiritual emotional energy. The Archons have been feeding on humanity's devotional practices for millennia. Every time someone prays in fear, begging for mercy, declaring their unworthiness, they're generating exactly the kind of energy these beings consume. It's a farm, and most of humanity doesn't even realize they're the crop. But you can step out of the field right now. The hand position isn't complex. The technique isn't difficult. What makes it powerful is your intention and your awareness. When you form the mudra, palms facing each other, 6 inches apart, fingers angled inward, thumbs crossed, creating the diamond opening, you're not just making a gesture, you're activating a specific energetic configuration that disrupts surveillance frequencies. Combined with focused awareness through the diamond opening and conscious intention to connect directly with Source without intermediaries, you create what the ancient texts called the Chamber of Silence, a space within consciousness itself where you cannot be monitored, interrupted, or harvested. Try it right now. Put your hands in position. Feel the space between your palms. Notice how the energy begins to circulate between your hands rather than broadcasting outward. Gaze through the diamond opening your thumbs and forefingers create. Let your vision soften slightly, seeing but not focusing on anything specific. Take 3 deep breaths. Notice how different this feels compared to traditional prayer postures. You're not performing for anyone. You're not broadcasting for anyone. You're not submitting to anyone. You're creating a direct line to your own higher consciousness and to Source itself, on a frequency the watchers cannot access. The texts, discovered in 1945, contain this teaching alongside instructions for soul liberation and escape from the reincarnation cycle. This wasn't coincidental placement. The ability to pray without being monitored is essential preparation for souls planning to exit the system entirely. As long as the Archons can track your consciousness, read your energetic signature, and intercept your spiritual transmissions, they can manipulate you back into the cycle at the moment of death. But if you've trained yourself to operate outside their detection range, if you've mastered the art of invisible communion with Source, you have a chance to slip through the net when your consciousness separates from physical form. This is why Jesus taught this technique to his inner circle with such emphasis. He wasn't preparing them to be better religious followers. He was preparing them to break free entirely. The hand position is one piece of a larger liberation technology that includes specific awareness practices, energy management, and understanding of how the reincarnation system functions. But it's a crucial piece. You cannot exit a prison if the guards can always see you. You must learn to move unseen. This mudra teaches your consciousness how to operate in stealth mode, how to connect with divine Source directly without every predatory entity in the nearby dimensions detecting the transmission and trying to intercept it. Some of you reading this are feeling a recognition right now. Something in your soul remembers this teaching. You've used this technique before, maybe in past lives, maybe in the spaces between lives. Maybe in moments of deep meditation, when your consciousness accidentally stumbled into the right configuration. That feeling of coming home. When you put your hands in this position isn't imagination, it's memory. Your soul recognizes technology it once knew. The Archons work very hard to make certain you forget these techniques with each new incarnation. The birth trauma, the childhood conditioning, the religious programming, the educational indoctrination, the societal pressure, all of it serves to bury the knowledge your soul carried into this life. But it's not gone. It's dormant. And teachings like this act as trigger codes, awakening what you already knew but had forgotten. If you're someone who's felt watched your entire life, who sensed presences during prayer, who experienced the disturbing feeling that your spiritual practices were being monitored by something that didn't have your best interests in mind, you weren't paranoid. You were perceiving reality accurately. The surveillance is real. The energy harvesting is real. The monitoring system is real. But now you have a key to step outside it. You have a hand position that creates a blind spot. You have a technique that lets you commune with Source directly without the Archons intercepting your transmission. Use it. Practice it. Make it your default prayer posture. And notice what changes in your spiritual experience when you're no longer broadcasting your every thought and feeling to entities that feed on your energy. If this resonates with something deep in your consciousness, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that others who need this teaching should find it. Subscribe to this channel, because the information coming through here is specifically calibrated for souls preparing for liberation. And share this video with anyone you know who's been searching for real spiritual technology, not just religious platitudes. The chosen ones are waking up. The surveillance grid is losing its effectiveness. More and more souls are remembering how to operate outside the detection range. The Archon's control system is failing. But each individual must learn these techniques for themselves. Each consciousness must practice invisibility. Each soul must reclaim the ability to connect with Source without intermediaries or monitors. The hand position Jesus taught is your first tool. Learn it, use it, and watch what happens when you pray without being seen. You came here for a reason. Not to this video, to this planet, to this life, to this moment of mass awakening. You're not here to be good. You're here to be free. The hand position is more than a prayer technique. It's a declaration of sovereignty. It's you telling the watchers that you will no longer feed them. You will no longer be monitored. You will no longer allow intermediaries between you and Source. Every time you form this mudra, you're practicing liberation. You're training your consciousness to operate outside their grid. You're preparing for the moment when you'll need to slip past their detection completely. That moment is coming. For some of you, sooner than you think. Make sure you're ready. Make sure you remember how to be invisible. The Archons are counting on you for getting this by tomorrow, returning to standard prayer postures that make you visible and vulnerable. Your soul is counting on you to remember, to practice, to master this technique before you need it most. Which voice will you listen to?